to present to you our speaker today. He is the founder and managing partner of Witty Leadership Center and the former longtime co-CEO of the Arbiter Institute. He has authored numerous best-selling books. Ladies and gentlemen, these are books that really changed my life. The best-selling leadership books of all time. And you cannot have this book, The Leadership and Self-Deception, and the world's best-selling book on conflict resolution. I think my friends who are here is aware that Peace is My Advocacy. So Anatomy of Peace is a book that you have to read. Our speaker today has mentored leaders and trained workforces of many of the world's most well-known top Fortune 500 organizations, and is recognized worldwide as an innovative and invigorating thought leader. Ladies and gentlemen, with pride and honor, and I'm really happy to have you in the Philippines to discuss enabling digital transformation, the 4 quadrants of organizational change. Please help me welcome Mr. Jim Farrell. Let's give a virtual clap, please.
Thank you, Lisa. So good to be with all of you this morning. Thank you for this opportunity. I am going to share my screen here with you. Let's see here. We'll utilize a few resources on the screen as we go. Thank you, Lisa, for that generous introduction. And our topic today, digital transformation, and how we really need to what we need to do, what we need to think about to enable that. Now, what I'm going to get into actually applies to transformation generally of any type, but as we go, we'll be applying this specifically to digital transformation. Any questions that you might have as we go, I invite you please to type them into the chat. We'll be collecting all of those questions. We'll have a few minutes at the end. We'll be able to do a Q&A, and we'll take on as many of those questions as we can. So please don't hesitate. It's a very important topic. It's a nuanced topic. It's not simple. So there are a lot of things to think about, and I want to be as helpful as I can be to you today. What we'll do is in my time, I want to walk through 3 tools for you that are very helpful, we found here at Withy, for enabling any kind of transformation, including digital transformation. Those tools are, first, we call the 4 quadrants of organizational change. That's where we'll start. And then we'll go from there to, let's see if I can get my slide to advance. We'll then go through another tool called the 4 levels of change agility. And then finally, we're going to put those 2 pieces together. We're going to understand these quadrants. Then we're going to understand these levels that we can attain and build upon within each quadrant. And we'll put those together, and then we'll dive into an integrated approach that we call 4-dimensional strategies, the transformation compass. And we'll apply all this to digital transformation here as we go. Okay, so we'll start then with the 4 quadrants of organizational change. Now, just to get started, I want you to consider something. This is sort of a simple distinction, but it turns out it drives so many things in my experience. Think of an organization here for a moment. Any organization. And an organization is, on the one hand, it's a single thing, it's a collective, but it's made up of a whole bunch of individual things, all of us people. And this is both the challenge and the opportunity of leadership, which is how do you take all of these individuals and mobilize them together so they come together and operate as a single entity? That's really the art of leadership. And that's certainly the art of bringing together people digitally and as you're mobilizing your digital solutions as well. So we're going to start with this distinction, first of all, that an organization, any organization of any size, is on the one hand, a collective. So you'll see that here on one side of the screen. And on the other hand, it's made up of individuals. So those are 2 dimensions. Now I'm going to add 2 more dimensions to this. The first is this, that individuals, let's start on the individual side. We have outsides to us. We have exteriors. That is, there are things that you can see when you're looking at me. You can hear me, you can hear the words I'm saying, you can see the actions I'm taking. I have, if you will, an outside. Same is true of the collective, of the company. The company has a, quote, outside. You can see it. You can see the structure of an organization. You can point at the systems of the organization, all those things. So we have both individuals and the organization, the collective. They have outsides, but equally we have insides. Okay, so there are a lot of things, although, that you can see about me. There are a whole bunch of things you can't see about me. In fact, some things I might not want you to see about me, right? I mean, we all have our insides. We all have our outsides. We have our attitudes, for example. We have our feelings, our emotions, our beliefs. All these things are on the inside of an individual. You can't see them, okay? It's true also on the collective side. There are insides to an organization that you can't really see. And you might think of culture this way, that the culture of an organization is the inside of the place. You can feel it if you're there, but you can't, it's not tangible in the same way that things are on the outside. So when you think of these this x-axis and this y-axis, individuals and collectives on the x-axis, outsides and insides on the y-axis, that yields 4 quadrants that are always at play, no matter what we're trying to change or transform in an organization. And you'll see how they're in play around digital transformation. So the first quadrant here, the numbers don't matter. There's not really a sequence to them. They're all interrelated. But let's start here on the individual interior quadrant. And we call this quadrant attitude. So these are the things inside of an individual that you can't see: my feelings, my thoughts, my beliefs, my mindset. All this is the inside, the attitude of an individual. Okay, that's quadrant 1. Quadrant 2 would be the behaviors of the individual. So my own behaviors or the behaviors of all the individuals in your organization. Those are things you can see. Okay. Quadrant 3, we'll go now on the interior of the collective. We call this culture. So that's the interior of the collective, culture. And then the exterior of the collective, we call it structure. Now, structure includes systems, it includes processes, for example. It's all the things you can look at, point at, sort of touch on the collective. Okay. Now, here, I've had experience across these quadrants now for almost 3 decades. And one of the things I've learned is that most organizations, and in fact, even individual leaders, I would say too, come with biases usually in favor of 1 or 2 quadrants over some of the others. And there's a challenge that we at Withy call the problem of foundationalism. And the foundationalist mistake is to believe that if maybe I feel like I really know how to change behavior, so we're going to work on the behavior quadrant in our company. Like, for example, we want to help people use digital tools more, or start to think in terms of, sort of digital ways. And we try to put all of our efforts in that one quadrant. And it's not that those efforts are mistaken. It's just that they will be held back if we're not also putting efforts into the other quadrants. So for example, let's say maybe someone, we want to affect people's attitude about sort of digital transformation, which we need to do. It's one of the quadrants, which means it's super important. But if the structures of the organization aren't set up to support digital transformation, you're going to find that the individuals will get frustrated and their attitudes will actually turn against it. Okay. And their behaviors won't come along as a result, or maybe the culture of the place doesn't yet quite support it. So all of these things are interrelated. And if all we do is invest all of our time and our resources and our investments in one of these quadrants and ignore more or less the others, what you're going to find is you will plateau on your efforts because they're tethered together. You might think of like a rubber band that holds each of these, it connects each of these. And you can push up one without paying too much attention to the other. And that puts a little upward pressure on on the others, but the others not being lifted themselves or putting downward pressure on the one you're trying to invest in. And so you'll find you'll plateau. Another metaphor you might think of is making a bed. I mean, think of a bed sheet. You don't make a bed by only pulling on one corner of the sheet, right? You have to pull on all four corners in order to get the bed made. It's the same thing in any kind of organizational transformation. So then our let's see if we advance this. So that means then that any attempt at organizational transformation, including digital transformation, as I mentioned, will always involve each of these quadrants. So we just need to keep that in mind. There are behavioral solutions that they're great, many of them. There are attitudinal solutions, they're great, many of them. There are structural solutions, there are cultural solutions, and you as change agents just need to be aware, first of all, at a high level, that all of these things are always in play. And when you're planning your digital or other kinds of transformations, to be staying aware of that. And two, there's something else that's super helpful about thinking about your change and transformations efforts this way. You might, in many organizations, especially as they scale up in size, find they have many different kinds of change initiatives going on in the organization. And companies can get change fatigue, right? I mean, it's like, one more thing, we're doing one more kind of initiative here, we're adding it to all the other things we're doing. And just by the very nature of that, people can push back and their attitudes won't come along, and behaviorally they won't buy in and change things, and the culture of the place doesn't change, et cetera. But if you think about this integrated holistic structure, one of the benefits of it is it will enable you to be able to simplify, to integrate all of your various change efforts and show how they're actually a single effort. It's not 8 separate things we're doing. It's one thing we're doing. It's just that there's cultural facets to what we're doing. There are structural facets to what we're doing. There are behavioral ones and attitudinal ones. And when you can see that and structure your efforts that way, it really makes it so much easier for people to understand, oh, I get it. Okay, there aren't 8 things going that I'm tired of. It's only one thing. They're just these, there are these different pieces to this single initiative. That's one of the very powerful applications of this kind of understanding. Okay, so with this understanding, then, what growth means, what transformation requires, is it requires increases in what I'm going to call today change agility. Okay, now by change agility, I really mean 2 things. I mean, it's a combination of increasing ability and increasing adaptability, both ability and adaptability. If I have both of them, if I don't have the ability, even if I'm adaptable, I can't be very agile because I don't have the abilities. I might have the abilities, but I'm not adaptable, and I won't be agile for the same reason. So change agility requires both an increase in ability and an increase in adaptability across each of these quadrants. So what I'm going to do is I want to dive into next, and then I'm going to bring these pieces together. I'm going to dive in with you into the different levels of change agility. And these levels will apply to each of these quadrants. And as a change agent, what you want to do in order to really drive transformation, digital transformation in this case, is to be very clear on where are we, at what level of change agility are we currently in quadrant 1, for example, and in quadrant 4. Where are we? And I'm going to give you a tool. I'm going to show you how to do that. And there's an assessment that you can access that you'll be able to get further data on that. So to sort of get a baseline where we are as an organization, personally and as an organizational in each of these quadrants. And then to see, okay, so here's where we're at. How do we go up to the next level of change agility in the culture quadrant, for example, or in the behavior quadrant, for example? That's what we're going to get into next, okay? So those are the 4 quadrants. Then again, it's a mistake. They're all important, okay? So, but it's a mistake to think that focusing on one quadrant is going to solve all the problems of the other quadrants. They're interrelated. They all affect each other. Behavior affects attitude, and attitude affects behavior. Structure affects attitudes, and attitudes affect structure. Culture's affected by both behaviors and attitudes and by structure, etc. They're all interrelated. And if we transform, we need to concentrate on transforming each of them. So let's look at the levels then next of how the levels of transformation or these levels of change agility in each quadrant. Okay. Okay. So first level is, and I'm going to put these in sort of using mathematical terms here as we get going in this. So the lowest level of change agility is what we here at Withy Leadership Center call subtraction. And when we're at the subtraction level, we're getting in each other's way. So interpersonally, we're getting in each other's way. Structurally, the structures are getting in people's way as well. I mean, we're actually impeding each other. The structures of a place are impeding progress. The culture is. Individually, our attitudes are, our behaviors are impeding we're getting in each other's way. That puts us at a subtraction level of change agility. It's really hard to get any kind of positive transformation when we look like that when we're working, okay? So that's level one, the lowest level, subtraction. Let's take it up a level. The next level is addition, okay? So at the addition level, we're not obstructing, but we're not particularly helping. I mean, so when I'm at addition, I now know what my work is. For example, thinking of an individual, I know what my job is. I know what my responsibilities are. I have the ability to do that work. I might be super capable, highly skilled. I might do a great job at my work as well. But what's happening at the addition level is I'm just doing my work. Okay, I'm no longer getting in other people's ways, but I'm not actually helping them necessarily either. I'm just sort of got my head down, focusing on my job. That's addition. That's better than subtraction. That's a big advance, but there's still quite a ways that we can go if we're going to become more agile in our ability to change and transform. The next level up is multiplication. Okay. So now at the multiplication level, what's happened is we're still adding. Okay, we're no longer getting in each other's way, and we're doing our jobs. We're clear on what our work is. We're skilled. We're doing our work. We're adding, but we've added on top of that our collaboration with each other. So we're helping each other in the way we're doing our work and making each other's jobs easier. That's a multiplier level, and you can see when we do that individually and organizationally, we're becoming much more agile in our ability to change. Partly because when I'm merely at addition, I'm only kind of thinking of my own. I'm not even aware of all the changes that need to happen. Now, when I start to multiply and I bump up against other people and I'm caring and I'm noticing, I realize, oh, I need to make changes here and we can make changes over there. And all of a sudden you can see a real increase in change agility. Now, when we get up to multiplication. Now, multiplication is a fantastic level. Most organizations in the world are trying to get there. Our research at Withy Leadership Center shows, and I'll get into that research here in a little bit, shows that most organizations, or on average, organizations are about midway between addition and multiplication, with differences between the quadrants, as you'll see. Some of the quadrants are usually a little bit stronger and others a little bit weaker than the others. But on average, about halfway or so between addition and multiplication across industries, okay? So multiplication is great. It's where most organizations, if they can get there, they think, wow, we're really doing a fantastic job. It's just there's a place that's way more agile in its ability to sort of change and transform and can produce much greater results than multiplication can. And that's the level we call compounding. Now, I want you to notice something just in the simple diagram here about compounding. And the difference between multiplication and compounding. When we're multiplying, notice it's still me over here. Think of, these are individuals. Think of these as teams for a moment. Think of this as, say, the sales department on the one hand and the marketing department on the other hand, for example. You have these two departments at multiplication. They're helping each other, collaborating externally. But there's still a divide there. They're still split off from each other. There's the separate sales department, the separate marketing department. We're sort of helping across these divides. We kind of know our own stuff pretty well inside our own circle. And we might be guessing about things that are happening inside the other circle for the other person or the other people, the other team. But we don't really know. We're not, it's sort of across the divide. That's as good as we can do, is sort of help externally. But when we're compounding, the barriers are down. There's been a convergence now of us. I now have a depth. We're no longer just interacting on the surface of things and even helping on the surface of things. We've gone to a level of depth of understanding and of helping. So we're collaborating internally now as well. We're actually co-creating together when we get to the compounding level. We're not working across the divide. There can still be a sales department and a marketing department, but there's a sense in which in a deep way we're merged, intentionally we're merged. Our understanding of each other is merged. And what that means, among many other things, is now when I'm acting, when I'm at a compounding level, it's not me acting across some divide. The other people around are already inside of me while I'm acting. I'm already considering them. I'm thinking about, I have an understanding. I have this deep caring. So in all my decisions, everyone else is in those decisions that I'm making and the actions I'm taking. And by the same token, if they're compounding too, I am in their decisions and I am in their actions. So we get this incredible sort of exponentiating effect when we get to a compounding level, because walls have been coming down between us and the organization. Now, one of the ways to see what that means, to get a feel for that means, and think about this in terms of digital transformation and what a difference each of these levels would make to your ability as an organization to transform digitally, if you just think about what it means mathematically. So let's think of a team of 5 people here, okay, for a moment. Okay, and let's think of the output. What's the output of a team of 5 at a subtraction level? Well, one way to think about it is that at subtraction level, a team of 5 is operating at 5 minus n. I mean, they have 5 people, but because they're getting in each other's way to some extent, they're actually producing less than 5 because there's a level of their energy that's getting sucked up and churned up and negated by all of this getting in the way, okay? So now let's move up a level. What does the math look like when we get to addition? And again, we're gonna, this apply, and you'll see how this applies to each of the 4 quadrants here in just a few minutes. But let's, just taking it up to the addition level. Now what's happening is I'm showing up, I know my work, I'm doing my work, I might be doing it excellently well. My teammates are doing the same. There's 5 of us doing that. So our output in that case is 5, okay? Which is better than less than 5. But now let's take it up to multiplication. And this is why, even though I don't think people are normally thinking in sort of these kind of mathematical terms, but we intuit this. We know that making the jump to multiplication is a huge move past addition. And if we're ever going to actually be able to get agile in our change efforts, we've got to break out of addition sort of bondage and be able to get to a multiplication level. And the math shows us that. I mean, now it's not just that I'm showing up doing my job and my teammates doing his and the other teammates doing hers. And we add all that up. It's still, no, we're actually doing our work in a way that's helping each other. So we get this multiplier effect, and our output now is 25, which is a whole lot more than 5, which is why organizations around the world are chasing after that ability. But the thing is, and that's great, but it's nowhere near what you're able to pull off when you get to compounding. And compounding is where real transformation, because transformation happens in leaps and chunks. And by the way, I'll show you some resources here in a few minutes, but if you want to dive into any of these topics we're talking about, you can go to the withy.com website. That's WITHIII, withy.com. And we have a lot of white paper resources there that you can dive into on the 4 quadrants, on these different levels, on transformation. There's one called The Truth About Transformation that talks about how transformation is not continuous. It happens in chunks and leaps. And that's been scientifically proven to be the case. And you can see the leaps here in the way the mathematical operators work. And you'll see the massive leap now when we go from multiplication to compounding. Now, since we're not just doing our work in a way that's helpful to each other, we're inside each other. I mean, we're on each other's minds, in our hearts. We've merged in this deep kind of way, no longer working just at surface. So the team is really working at a 5 to the 5th power kind of way, which yields an output of 3,125. And you can see just a massive leap now. It's a huge leap from addition to multiplication, just a massive leap once you start getting beyond multiplication to compounding. And that's really where big transformation is enabled. With that in mind, I want to run a little poll. So, and I think the poll's set up here. Let's just test this. So I'm going to run poll number 1. I'm going to launch this. So look at just do the first of these. I don't know if both of these are going to show up at once. If they do, only respond to question number 1. Don't respond to question number 2 yet. Only question number 1. We'll get to number 2 in just a little bit. Which level of math would you say predominates in your organization? Okay. If you had to choose one, I know it's a mix, but if you had to think about it in your organization, on average, would you say, we're mostly subtracting, or you know what, I'd say we're mostly adding, or we're mostly multiplying, or we're mostly compounding? What would you say? Let's take a few moments here. You can weigh in with that. Don't do question 2 yet. You can leave that till a little bit later. We're just doing question 1 now. Okay. Still wait. If you can just weigh in on question 1. We'll come to question 2 later. Okay. Interesting. Okay. Give you another 10 seconds to weigh in there. We have 30% of you, 33% who have weighed in so far. Okay, 5 more seconds. Okay, all right, we'll end this. We have about 40% who have voted here, so we'll end the poll. And I want to show you what the result. Now, never mind the results on question 2. We haven't really got into that enough yet. So let's just focus on question 1. So this is interesting. So none of you said that there's a preponderance of subtraction in your organization. That's terrific news. Addition looks like it's most, 42% of you are saying that, that's probably where your organization is mostly weighted right now. Although multiplication at 35%, it's quite, actually, this is really interesting. Compounding, that's a higher number than we normally see here, just when people are self-assessing. 27% of you, that's terrific news, are feeling like your organizations are actually already operating at the compounding level. As you go up, your ability to transform and to mobilize together around digital transformation is hugely affected, okay? All right, so we'll stop sharing that. So here again, I would say, based on your results, on average, it looks like your organizations are kind of 3/4 of the way past addition toward multiplication on average, if we were just to take that just as a quick look, okay? All right, we'll come back to that second poll here in just a little bit. Okay, so let's come back now. And we are now going to put together the 4 levels of organizational change and these 4 levels of change agility, these 4 levels of math. We're going to map them on top of each other, okay? And this is a section we call 4-dimensional change strategies. Okay. Again, we don't want to fall for the mistake to only do 1-dimensional change strategies. It's not going to work. You're not going to get to digital transformation by focusing on 1 quadrant alone. It won't happen. You'll get some change and improvement in the organization. But if you really want digital transformation, you're going to want to have a 4-dimensional strategy. And we have a tool we call the Transformation Compass that will help us to get oriented about where we're at, where we think we are in each of these areas, which gives us sort of a baseline. If we're going to get more agile, again, so the combination of our ability and our adaptability in each of these quadrants, what is the path to get there? So here's our transformation compass. It has the 4 quadrants: attitude, behavior, culture, structure. And what we're going to do is we're going to map on top of this each of these 4 levels of agility, change agility, these 4 levels of math, which we're going to fill in here in just a moment. But the first level is subtraction. The next level is addition. The next level is multiplication, and the final level is compounding. Okay, now let's put some meat on those bones, level by level. And again, when you're thinking about mapping out a digital transformation journey, again, it's critical that you're paying attention to each quadrant, not just one, and that you have clarity on where you are in each of the quadrants. And then you see the path, how you expand. Each expanding sort of circle outward is an increase in our change agility and our ability to transform. So here at the subtraction level, let's just talk about what this is meaning. So when we're subtracting behaviorally, what's happening is we're impeding each other, as we talked about just a few minutes ago. We're getting in each other's way. We're making work harder. Okay. Structurally, what's typically happening here, and this is why structure is getting in the way in this case, is structure's lacking. I mean, in the digital case, we might not have the digital infrastructure available to us, for example, or we might be missing key pieces of it. Or another way structure can be lacking is, as an organization scales, the structures, the systems, the processes that really worked for us 10 years ago, when we were, 1/4 the size of what we are now, don't work for us anymore, but our structures have not adapted. And so they're now lacking. What used to be good enough is no longer good enough. Okay. Culturally, what's generally happening, there are a lot of words we can put to this, but in one way or another, when we're at a subtraction level in our culture, there's an apathy. Now, what does apathy look like in an organization culturally? Well, what it looks like is that people are happy to, take a paycheck and they'll trade their time for their money. But they're sort of apathetic about the place. It could be this company, it could be some other company. They don't much care. It's more about maybe what they're personally getting out of it. But there's a general sort of apathy regarding the purpose or the mission of the place. Attitudinally, there's a real deep self-focus. It's just about me. I'm drawing my own sort of identity just really tightly around myself. And that makes me a subtractor in an organization. So now let's say that's where we see that we are, at least in one of these quadrants. Well, if we're going to go out, if we're going to now build our ability to be able to transform digitally in other ways in each of these quadrants, what should we start thinking about? What might that path, the next sort of stop in the path be? Well, behaviorally, if we start there in the behavior quadrant, and again, we can start at any of these. There's not an order because they're all interrelated. But instead of now impeding, now we're operating. I mean, I'm showing up in an operational way. My teammates are as well. We know our jobs. We're lined up fairly well, with our bosses, et cetera. We're doing our work. We're operating. We're operational. Structurally, the structures aren't lacking so much. They're transactional now. They're getting the job done. They might be a bit rigid. They're not anticipating future needs. They're kind of getting the job done. They're transactional. We've moved culturally, typically out of sort of a general laissez-faire sort of apathy to kind of a siloing that you're going to find pockets of an organization where people will be really caring and other pockets not so much. And one of the ways that shows up is that there'll be sort of this siloing that you'll be able to feel that a lot of people complain about because it's a problem because it gets you stuck at addition, but it's better than apathy. At least you have people caring about their department now when they didn't so much care before. That's an advance to addition. And now attitudinally, we're including more people. I mean, at least my team, I'm thinking about them. I'm drawing my circle of sort of my identity wider than just me. It's expanded out to sort of the people like me or my team. Okay, so now let's say we're adding. We see that, okay, it sort of feels like our structures are transactional, or it sort of feels like we're siloed up culturally, so where do we go in each of these quadrants if we really want to drive transformation, in this case, digital transformation? Well, next ring out is a move to multiplication. Now, behaviorally, we're not just operating, we're co-operating now, which attitudinally means that we've broadened ourselves in terms of who we're thinking about. We're now, the people that we're interacting with, they're on our minds as well. So that has expanded attitudinally. The structures are not just getting the job done. They're actually enabling things to happen positively as well, which you're getting extra sort of multiplier energy out of that. And there's an integration now across the divides in the organization. The silos are starting to get knit. And we're becoming more and more, at least on the outside of what we're doing, which again has implications for how we're feeling inside. There's this integration that's happening. And this is great. You get to this ring and a lot of really good things can happen. And as I mentioned, most organizations are trying to get to this place. And that's great. It's just that there's a place that's way better than this, okay? And that's the compounding ring. So now let's think about what that looks like as we move. So let's look again at behavior. I started behavior because you can see behaviors. They're easier. You can point at them. We're not only cooperating externally now. We're now interacting in a deep way, not just a surface way. We're co-creating in what we're doing. And this is when you really get to a transformation sort of level. Is that transformations happen when individuals sort of dropping their divides, they're what we call it withy, converging, and new solutions are exploding out of those convergences. That cannot happen if we're just staying, in our own spaces across the divides and sort of working across the divides. You get to the co-creation, entirely new possibilities emerge. Structures that before were good in that they were enabling, now energize. They are energizing in the same way that we individually are energizing. Culturally, it's not just that we've become integrated, we've gotten all the way to this deep devotion for what we're doing, what the purpose is, devotion to each other. We really care deeply. We care about this place. We care about our mission. And there's something really special that we're actually here doing our work and not somewhere else. And attitudinally, we become very expansive in how we're thinking about people and who we're thinking about. We've just become broader and broader and broader attitudinally. So this then is what we call the transformation compass. Okay. Again, in each of these 4 quadrants. So again, just so we're clear, we started with 4 quadrants. Then we went second to the 4 levels of change agility, 4 levels of math. We've now on this transformation compass laid those 2 over the top of each other. So now you see the 4 quadrants, you see the 4 levels of change agility, the same 4 levels of math, all integrated. And this gives you the ability to be able to sort of see where are we at? And if we're here at this level in this quadrant, what do we need to start thinking about in this quadrant? How about in these other quadrants, etc. Now with that, I want to go back to the poll, and this is where we'll do poll number 2. Okay, so I'm gonna launch this again. Some of you already, let's see, relaunching. Okay, yeah. So so now don't worry about question 1. We already did that. Only respond to question 2. If you need to scroll up to see your 4 choices there, go ahead and do that. And which quadrant do you think your organization is the weakest? Okay, where would you say your organization is the weakest? And specifically today, thinking about digital transformation, which quadrant do you think is the weakest? Okay, great. Good. All right. We have 30% of you now have weighed in so far. Let's go another 10 seconds. Again, you don't need to worry about question number 1. We're only going to pay attention to question number 2 here on this one. In which quadrant is your organization the weakest? Question 2. Okay. We're up to 50%. That's very good. Okay. Another 5 seconds. Okay. All right. Okay, we're at basically 60%. I'm going to end the poll now, and we'll share the results. So now if you scroll up, you can see this. So structure, 45% of you say that currently structure is your weakest quadrant in your organization relative to digital transformation. Okay? And that presents challenges, doesn't it? And depending on where we're at, I mean, if we're at a subtraction level, it would be interesting if we had a third pole. You can just think about this on your own. Those of you who said structure, where would you say you are structurally? Would you say it's subtraction, addition, multiplication, or compounding? And that will give you a clue as you look at the compass about maybe what you need to start thinking about. Second place, pretty close, behavior and culture. 25% of you said behavior is the biggest weakness towards digital transformation. 23% said culture, and then attitude, 20%. So those three are fairly close, with structure sort of spiking out ahead or behind, if you will, in this case, as being the one that might be the biggest current challenge. Oh, did I not share the results? I was just speaking. Did I share those? And was I just talking the whole time and you didn't see them? If so, I apologize. You can see them there. Again, 45% structure is the weakest, 25% behavior, 23% culture, 20% attitude. Okay. Okay, now with that, I want to point at a couple of resources here that you might find helpful. There's an assessment. Now we can do an assessment of your whole organization if you'd like. Just reach out to us and we can partner up with you and make that happen. But if you want to just individually go in and get some data for yourself, you can go to withy.com/assessment. And you'll also see it there on the homepage. And you can take an assessment that will give you data on where you are. One of the things that will happen is you'll get a compass map that looks something like this, depending on where your response is pointed. In this case, this person's case, this is from a real assessment. Attitudinally, in the organization, from this person's perspective, they were at 2.4. 4 is compounding, 3 is multiplying, 2 is adding, 1 is subtracting. They were 2.4 at attitude, 3.0 behaviorally, 2.0 culturally, and 2.4 structurally. Now, where this gets really interesting is when you collect the data across the organization. So you get that aggregated, you get a real picture of where people feel the organization is. And this is really important when you're talking about a transformation, and in this case, a digital transformation, to understand where we're at, because you don't know where to go or how you're going to get where you're going to go unless you know where you're at. And it's important to understand that all 4 of these dimensions are critically important, not just one of them. And so that's something that you could take advantage of. Also at withy.com, there's a white paper section with a whole bunch of white papers that'll dive into detail into different things, including a number of the things we've been talking about today: transformation, the 4 quadrants, et cetera. And those are all available for you if you'd like. On this assessment, these are the characteristics that are being measured. Attitudinally, it's measuring the depth at which people know each other, the level of listening, the level at which people are feeling respected, the level of interest people have in others, people's willingness to help other people. Behaviorally, the level of collaboration, accountability, conflict management, innovation, and manager communication. Culturally, the excitement generally in the organization, the sense of belonging, the trust and belief in leadership, the extent to which culture feels like a differentiator for an organization, people's interest in leaving the organization, and structurally, the strength of the systems and processes, the strength of the structures, the current strengths and weaknesses of the current leadership composition, the decision-making processes, and the level of empowerment that's happening as a result. So all those things are being measured in here. So that's something that you can avail yourself of if you would like. Is you can dive into that assessment at withy.com. You can also dive into many of the other resources that are there for you. Now, with that, let's throw it open to you for any questions you might have, and we can just chat through anything that might be on your mind relative to what we've been talking about.
All right. Yeah.
Jim, there are questions on the from Mark Flores.
Yeah, I'll be reading it, Lisa.
Yeah, okay. Go ahead, Danny.
Yeah, okay. So thank you, Jim. So a question for Mark Flores. So in the four quadrants, where do you put the responsibility of the management team to provide enough information about the change initiative and how the change will impact on the workforce?
Okay, this is really important. Let me go back a slide. Look, in my view, this is massively the work of leadership. What happens, and I've seen this thousands of times now in my career, is there are all kinds of good intentions in organizations. I mean, there's nothing but good intentions for the most part for all the initiatives that are being taken. But people don't generally, including most leaders, they don't have an integrated understanding about how the various efforts and pieces fit together. And so it feels actually overwhelming to most people. And it's one of the main reasons why there's a cynicism generally about any new change initiative or any new training initiative, for example, or other sorts of change initiatives being brought in, because people have a whole bunch of examples of the ones that have been tried before and they didn't work enough. So we have another one and we have things being added together. And it's not clear enough. It's not simple enough. But if a leader understands how the pieces actually fit together, that their good intentions actually are functions of good intuitions. It's just that they don't have, most people, including most leaders in my experience, don't have an understanding, an integrated way to be able to see how their good intuitions actually fit neatly together. So if I were a leader of an organization in need of digital transformation, it would be priority one for me, A, to know where we are, to understand, we need to know where we are structurally relative to digital transformation, where we are behaviorally, where we are attitudinally, where we all are culturally. I need that baseline. And then we come up together with the integrative. This is partly what we do with leadership teams and organizations, is we help them to see where they're at. And then together we build with them their plan, their transformation plan of how they're going to build their structure out, how they're going to improve their behaviors, their attitudes, their culture, et cetera. And then the leaders are equipped to communicate that as an integrated approach and plan to the entire company. So they understand, here's what we're doing, here's why it's important, this is how this piece is related to this piece over here. We need them both. And in my experience, not nearly enough leaders do that. And it's because they don't actually have a structure, a framework that helps them to actually see how things are integrated and fit together. I hope that's helpful. Mark, hope that was helpful for you. Do you have another question, Ellie?
Yeah, this one's from Olive Alejandrino. Her question is, who should really be driving digital transformation? What department should lead digital transformation in an organization?
Well, Olive, okay, that's an interesting question. And I would say it depends, because different organizations have different structures and they have different talent in different places of their structures. And those are all realities. But whatever the structure and wherever the talent is, I would say it's critical that the whole organization is involved in transformation. If there's going to be an individual point person, if there's going to be a team of folks, or there's an individual who's pulling a team of folks, that should be an integrated team from across the organization. Because what happens too often is you'll have just say one leader layer making all those decisions, and they don't have the people who are affected most by the decisions actually in part of the decision-making process. So it's really important, if you're going to have an integrated change approach, to actually have an integrated change team. So you get those various perspectives. Where you're going to locate the point person isn't as important as that is, that you're going to have an integrated viewpoints that are involved in the process.
All right, amazing. Next, we have, where does competence and ability fit in?
Where does which? I'm sorry, Ellie?
Where does competence and ability fit in?
Okay, well, competence, remember we talked about the levels of change agility as a combination of ability and adaptability, Okay. So you have competency, for example, that fits in every level. There are competencies that are necessary to move from impeding to operating, from operating to cooperating, from cooperating to co-creating. There are abilities that are necessary to move on the structural side from transactional to enabling, from enabling to energizing. So the abilities and the competencies are built in, they're in each quadrant, and they are part of the move from each level to each level within the quadrant.
All right. Next is from Mark Flores again. He's asking, is a transformation compass an assessment tool before you go into transformation?
Yes, it's yes and. I mean, so it gives you a baseline, but it also gives you a high level map of here's the terrain, here's where we currently are, and here's where we need to go. And so you can keep coming back. You can rerun the transformation compass. You know, you can run this assessment across the organization, a certain cadence over a period of time, to see how the various change initiatives are actually taking hold in each of the quadrants.
All right, then there's another question from, hold on. Jimmy says, where does resources like budget comes in the transformation process? And we may need a considerable budget to make the transformation process operational, especially on structures. How can government support?
How can government support?
Yeah, I think we have two questions here. You want me to divide it two questions?
Yeah, divide it into two.
Okay, the first one is, where does resources like budget come in transformation process?
Well, it's everywhere, right? I mean, yeah, I mean, and certainly the obvious one that Jimmy mentioned was in structure. That resources are needed on structure. I mean, you might be in a situation in your organization, you don't have the digital infrastructure you need, and there needs to be an investment. And that's a reality. Now, it might be that there's a gap of time right now before we're going to have it, in which case it's really important as leaders that you help the organization understand exactly where you're at and why, what the current barriers are, but what your current plans are for overcoming those barriers, so people can have belief in that future and can join the team to become part of that change for the positive. But change, I mean, you might decide that, look, in the attitude quadrant, we need to bring in some training, or we need coaching in the behavior quadrant, for example. We need some culture assessment work. I mean, all of these things require some kind of investment, either time or money or both. And that's a reality of business. And you just have to look in very wise way, but realize that if it's important to you to transform, it's not going to happen without effort. And that's going to require resources, and you're going to have to start making some real, perhaps tough decisions about where you'll put those resources. Dave, what was the second question, Ellen?
Yeah. The follow-up question to that is how government can support.
Well, look, that's massive on digital transformation as an example. And I don't know if there are governmental leaders here on our event here today, but doing investments in infrastructure and digital infrastructure that would enable individuals and organizations to tap into those things and utilize them is a massive escalator for performance throughout the region. So that should be, I'm sure it is there in the Philippines, for example, as it is in other places. I'm sure, I know here in the United States, there's a massive battle right now going on around infrastructure legislation in general. But digital infrastructure investment is hugely important in this modern age for any government. And if I were a governmental leader, I'd make sure that we're really looking at that and investing in it hard. And linking, not just making the investments, but investing with the business leaders and pulling them in the same way, that you want to, inside an organization, involve people from around the organization. You don't want to be a governmental leader who's just going to be the government over here working in an addition way with the companies over there. You want to bridge the divide and at least get the multiplier level between the government and the businesses, if not to the compounding level. And so you're involving the business community in the process when you're making the governmental decisions as well.
All right, I have Roseanne here asking if you can please elaborate on the difference between attitude and behavior.
Sure. So Senthil in the next presentation is going to dive into this in depth. Okay, so I'll just say a little bit now, but he's going to get into all kinds of aspects of this. Just think very high level, very simply. My behaviors are the things I'm doing, the things I'm saying, how I'm showing up sort of out, to the world, how you see me. But attitudinally, it's how am I feeling about things when I'm doing what I'm doing? How am I seeing you when I'm saying what I'm saying to you, right? For example, those are all my thoughts that I'm having, my feelings I'm experiencing. Those are all the attitudinal space. And that's a huge impact, because just as what I do to you matters a lot to you, okay? How I feel about you actually matters a lot to you too. And people will respond very often to how they feel like I'm feeling about them, in addition to how I'm behaving toward them. But as I mentioned, Sentha will get into that in a lot of detail in just a minute.
Okay. Then I have a question from Ms. Lisa. Globally, which area is the major weakness?
Globally, well, on average, so what our data shows is that structure on average is the weakest across organizations. Now, that's not true of every organization, but I'm talking on average that structure is the weakest. And it's the weakest actually by a significant margin. And the others kind of get, the others are fairly closer, but structure sticks out as being the weakest piece, which is interesting because it's interesting to me because you can see the structures, you can see the systems and processes in a way that you can't see the attitudes and cultures pieces. And you think, well, why don't we fix the stuff that we can see? But that does take major investment, and there are politics in play, and there are other kinds of issues. And sometimes people just don't know what to do. And so structure appears to be lagging a bit behind in most organizations.
So, Jim, that's a reflection of culture, right?
Well, of course it is, because these aren't separate. That's exactly right, Lisa, that structure depends on culture and on behavior, on attitude, just like behavior depends on structure and on culture, on attitude. They all depend on each other. They're all reflections of each other. It's exactly right. It's not that one is the foundation of all the others. They all affect each other, for sure.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay.
Yeah. All right. So, yeah.
Any more questions there, Ali?
I think that's about it. Now, if there aren't any more questions, or if you're just trying to put it here, you can always include it in the evaluation form that will be sent to you, and you can just direct it to Jim and get back to you on that.
That's great. Let me say one other thing. Just once again, if you want to dive into more of this, you can go to withy.com to do that. You can also link with Withy on LinkedIn. You can link with me on LinkedIn too. And all the stuff that's happening through Withy it gets distributed out through LinkedIn, and you can connect that way as well. Okay.
All right. So if there's no more questions, I'd like to thank you again, Jim, for
Pleasure.
gracing us this morning and joining us for this webinar. I'm sure everybody here enjoyed your part of the talk. Hope to have you again in our next sessions or webinars.
Okay.
Now, at this point, I'd like to invite Ms. Lisa to join us here as we welcome our next speaker, as we thank Jim.
Let me thank Jim Farrell first. Ladies and gentlemen, Jim deserves a virtual round of applause. That was really amazing. I think all of us are really thinking about digital transformation, not only digital, but other transformation initiatives. And I think all of us was given a framework to work on. This is something that probably in our head, but you put it really beautifully in one page. And that is a takeaway, I think, from everybody who's here. You can get in touch with Jim, or you can get in touch with ASEAMETRIC. We would like to be able to promote and really aggressively advocate with the organizational assessment in the Philippines. And this would require some consulting, Jim, right? Yeah. So in the event that they sign up, they normally would need consulting from with the Leadership Center. So is that something we can do, right? Even you are, by the way, you're based in Salt Lake City, right?
Yes,
in Utah.
that's right. Yeah.
Yeah, one of the most beautiful places in the world.
It is beautiful. But we're all, I mean, to our point today, we're all digitally connected, right? Now more than ever. So sure, yeah. I mean, what happens when we help you assess an organization in an integrated way? There's a digital part of that. I mean, that digital assessment is part of that. But then we'll spend some more time with you and with some of the different people in the organization, and we can do that remotely to get a little bit more detail about what's going on, and then we can really help you get a real picture about where the organization's at and where its current weaknesses are, and what you might think about putting attention to.
Okay. Again, another round of applause to Jim Farrell. Amazing guy.
Yeah, thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Much. Jim,
Pleasure.
you can now sleep.
Okay. Okay.
Like
All right.
that.
Okay.
All right.
Bye.
You're across the globe, so have a good night.
Okay.
Rest
Thanks
now.
so much,
Thank you so
everyone.
much.
Okay.
Thanks, Jim.
Yeah.
And now